principles in life, some are written, some are unspoken. If you want to go forward, you take one step and then you follow it with the other. That's how you move forward. Now in business, there's something called compliance. It is a set of rules that are either statutory or imposed upon yourself because you want to be efficient. And when you get that right, you're in good stead to growing that business of yours. Welcome to Business Connect. In this edition, I bring you a conversation around compliance with Cynthia Kwaku in our big conversation. Now, Cynthia is the founder and managing partner of CQ Legal and founder of Africa One Media. Enjoy the big conversation, and then later we'll be bringing you some other conversations in our digital business and hustle segments. Enjoy today's show. Thanks very much for making time, Cynthia.
Thank you for the opportunity.
It's interesting conversation I'd like to have with you because compliance by definition is essentially conforming to rules and standards. But business though has evolved over time, you now hear this watchword compliance. Every time you do business with a multinational, compliance. You want to do business, I mean, there's a lot of talk around procurement these days. There's always compliance. What is it and why is it so important?
Compliance essentially means doing the right thing.
Couldn't they have just called it that? Do the right
I like
thing.
to keep it a bit, so that people like us can be paid to explain to you what it means. Compliance is just making sure that you conform to the rules and regulations pertaining to your line of business. Whether it's local, whether it's international, doing the right thing. The reason why you're seeing that is becoming a buzzword these days is that all corporate entities, particularly multinationals, have seen the importance of ensuring that compliance is part of their strategy. In the past, compliance was almost seen as the end of the chain. Now it's become very central to the performance of every business. And so I think along the way people have come to realize that compliance is an implicit part of business success. So you're seeing that a lot more companies, starting with the multinationals and hopefully filtering down to local entities to make sure that it's part of the central vision for every entrepreneur and any business.
Okay, so I ventured into starting a business at some point in my life. I failed abysmally.
I did a few times too.
Okay, well, so I'm in good company.
So a good company.
So one of the things that I learned along the way was that, okay, so I started the business, I was the sole director, and then I went on to start a limited liability company, and then I forgot that, at the end of the year, there's something called filing, Beyond satisfying the basic statutory requirements of registration, filing, SNIT, and the revenue aspect of business. Is there anything else one should know about compliance?
I think compliance essentially, it should be treated on a case-by-case basis. If you're an entrepreneur or business person who comes with an idea, I think what a lot of us don't like to do is to sit down and put on paper exactly what we want to achieve. And this message goes for people who are looking long term. Before this, me and you had a little bit of a conversation about those who go into entrepreneurship for survival means, and then those who are looking at it as a long-term tool. And you actually mentioned and said, even if you started off business as survival, you can't stay in survival mode forever.
That's true.
Okay. So the key thing is that when we start or we have an idea that we want to do a certain type of business, compliance should be part of the framework that we sit down. So if I'm going to export certain items, what laws govern my type of operation based on the business? If I'm an entertainer, what laws do I need to adhere to? If I want to build, what laws do I need to adhere to? So it will be different depending on the type of business. The key thing here is that compliance saves you money. Oftentimes, and I've made this mistake myself a few times when I started as a young entrepreneur, you don't factor in the cost of compliance, and it comes at the end to bite you, right? Because even if you decide to grow, there will be a need for injecting more capital in. You might go to the bank, you might want other investors coming in, and they will demand some sort of due diligence to ensure that this business is what? And if you don't comply, it would obviously show that you aren't complying. So it really depends on a case-by-case basis and what you need to comply with. It also is very dynamic because the laws might change. And now we have a very strong, I would say strong companies code, which is essentially, in the past people just like to set up a company and it is a limited liability without knowing the obligations that they have.
In fact, nobody told you. They
Exactly.
just, I think I remember
Exactly.
when I started out, what I did was I remember the little, at the time, secondary school, I think it was called Commerce. The little bit I learned in there is that a limited liability company needed at least 2 directors.
Exactly.
So you find your brother or your friend, they sign up, you fill it out, the form.
And I have a conversation about the brother and friend bit. We'll talk about that later when it comes to even making sure that as a limited liability company, your board composition is one that would help your business growth. I've spoken about this a few times. So compliance, for me, is essential to business growth. If you want to expand, if you want to be a real business person, factor in the cost. Because if you start a business and you feel like, okay, I'm going to buy this ornament and sell them, and you haven't factored in the cost of paying GRA, the cost of paying any duties, the cost of anything compliance related, and yet you work out your profit as almost 100%, you've shortchanged yourself. Because that's not
because
real
those costs will come
they
back
will come back to you.
Yeah.
And it's not a true reflection of profitability. Okay, so many people go into business without taking all of this into account, and they actually think they are making profit, when in fact you're actually not making profit. Because if you took into account the fact that there are rules, regulations, and other things you need to pay, then it gives you a better picture. So when you're starting a business, you need to see the whole picture from the beginning. Ensure that, okay, if I was going to buy this item and sell it, after paying all my statutory obligations, after ensuring that I'm complying, would I still make profit?
Yeah, interesting. If you had to look across a spectrum of ideation, the inspiration to start the business, and how I would want my business to look and feel, branding, and compliance, which would you put first? And why?
Compliance.
Why?
Because it feeds into all of it. Okay, so let me, if you tell me the 2 things you said, I remember you saying.
So there's branding and inspiration to start a business.
Okay,
so you get up and you want to say, okay, I want to start a pure water business,
yes.
right? And I want to give it this name and I want to make this much money. You're saying compliance should be the foundation of
that's the
which
foundation of
everything
everything.
else is done.
I will sit down now, my better self, my more mature self. I didn't do this even 15, 20 years ago. I've learned a lot of mistakes and I'm incorporating them into my, I'm a visions person. I'm always coming up with some fantastic idea. Some of the things that I've tried to start have not progressed, and I blame the lack of knowledge on compliance to that. The first thing I will do is this business. What is the legal framework within which I need to operate? What are the right things that I need to do? Because every visionary wants to leave a legacy. So I don't believe that you are setting up the business to be profitable for the next 2-3 years. Most people who have visions want this vision to outlive them.
That's right.
Right? So I will start with compliance and lay down the regulatory. If you have to get an accountant, a lawyer, whoever to sit down with you and say, I want to start this business. What do I need to do? First of all, is it even important for me to set up as a limited liability company at this stage? Do I need that? Or do I set up a sole trader? And if I do, the composition of the board is important. And it's part of a compliance mindset that to ensure that if it's a pure water business, who am I putting on the board who's going to guide my firm to profitability? Right? So going to put your sister who's a fashion designer who has no knowledge whatsoever about, a pure water business may not help you. So even on the board level, you need to ensure that whoever is sitting on that board is somebody who fits into that compliance structure, okay? And I will sit down and just map out everything I need to do. And then, because it also feeds into brands, right? Branding is not about pictures. This is beautiful, Business Connect. But the brand business connect goes beyond the name business connect. And for brands to work, it's about respectability and reputation.
Which is an offshoot of the value system
Exactly,
that drives it.
exactly. So even in terms of branding, you know, the more successful you are, the more your clients trust you, the more people can attach some sort of worth, ethical standards to your brand that builds your business.
And that's when you don't want to mess up.
Exactly. So compliance for me, I think now it's the framework where I will start from.
I totally agree with you. And you talked earlier on about, you know, in getting the correct advice in the beginning, you may have to ask the question or get advice whether you should start off as a sole proprietor. Now, I may be fabulously wrong and quite erroneous in my thinking that if I want to do business with a multinational, they may frown on a sole proprietor and I may not get that business. But I am a startup.
Yes.
And I'm dreaming big.
Yes.
How do you balance that desire and the reality?
You know, wanting to do business with a multinational it's different from having the opportunity in front of you to do business with a multinational. So if you came to, and I'll say me, and you can go to anybody, it doesn't have to be me, it could be anybody. The considerations will be, where do I start now? And if it is better for you to start as a limited liability company, you have to understand that there are obligations that come with it, okay? I mean, people think it's fashionable. I've had young entrepreneurs come to me and I've said, don't start off as for your kind of business, you don't really need to start off a limited liability company. But there's so much, it's about the hype to them. It's always, if I'm a director of a company, I said,
I mean, it feels good.
it feels
I drop
good.
My card. I'm CEO of...
But it goes beyond that. It goes beyond that. You know, it goes beyond that. You do have obligations. And the question you need to ask yourself is that, am I able to meet these obligations? Are you with me? You can always convert. So if you start off as a sole proprietor, and my advice to young entrepreneurs is start it first, right? Start it first. As a sole proprietor, test the market. Form some sort of MOU with different partners. Test it for 6 months. Then, once you feel that you've gone through that test and the business is viable, you've done your feasibility, you know that there's something, then register. Don't be in a rush to register. Are you with me? And then you come, and a lot of them come to you and you say, set up a business plan. The importance of a business plan is to ensure that the business, you can leave a legacy, and compliance will fall part of that business plan. Because if you had a business plan, apart from the ideas of what you want to do, you would have a plan for the framework, the compliance structure that you need to put in place, what kind of tools you need to be able to ensure the workflow and efficiency and accountability and all of that will come into place. So put it down on paper, and take your time. Okay. That would be advice.
While I accept that there will be statutory elements of compliance, would you say that every aspect of compliance follows a certain statutory requirement or...
I think some of them are just having internal controls. I mean, I see compliance also as a way to ensure efficiency within an organization. Okay, so every organization must have a culture. Every organization must have an ethical standard that they comply with. And I mean, for my law firm, for instance, we have an ethics and compliance manual, which deals with everything from the font, because that feeds into our branding, to how we deal with interviews. So if we were representing a client, nobody in this firm has the power to say anything if a journalist calls them, and it feeds into our practice as lawyers. We cannot take instructions on a matter that we don't have experience in. It's part of our compliance manual. Because it feeds into everything we do as lawyers.
I'm beginning to see how you made the point that compliance actually brings a lot of value to the business.
It does.
Efficiency.
It does.
If you have efficiency, you're most likely going to be profitable as well.
Exactly.
But it costs money to be compliant, doesn't it?
Yes. But if it's part of the vision, the business plan in the beginning, as a business cost. I treat it as a business cost.
Everyone starts from somewhere, and some start with absolutely nothing. I think there's a line that says, We started out with a dream and a desire to do stuff,
Yeah.
no money. So if you're starting on a shoestring, how do you get compliance into what you're doing and be able to venture out there and hopefully start making money?
You know, we're living in a day today that everything is on the internet. There's just so much on the internet that is free. You may even do without going to a professional and paying a professional to do that. I think that if you, the same way when you have a business idea, you may would go onto Google and Google it and see what competitors are, all of that. You do the same when it comes to, how do I comply in this business? Borrow from people, read, and then have your own ethical standards, governance structures, risk management structures. All of this form part of compliance. And set up your own way that you do business. Are you with me? And then you will build on that as you're growing. Maybe if you start off as a small sole tradership, your compliance strategy will definitely evolve as the business grows. But the key thing is that you have to have a structure in mind that deals with it.
I'd like you to give me a 1-minute master class on the things you mentioned and just maybe give me the full spectrum. The statutory compliance, there's our own internal systems.
Yes.
You talked about risk management. I never thought that was necessary in compliance, to be honest with you. I thought it was just an innate thing you did, that, avoid risk. But I never thought you need to have a certain framework. What other things should an entrepreneur today, if they were going to do their own self-assessment and see whether they're compliant?
So I'll use two different case studies. So let me use a creative entrepreneur. So
I like that.
yes, that's exciting, isn't it? Let's use that. So let's use an entrepreneur who is a musician. He's got talent. He's about to start his business, right? He goes to a young producer and then asks the producer to give him a beat. Producer goes into the studio, jumps up something, gives it to him. He raps on it. He sings on it. Then he goes to a video producer who's a friend of his and says, I want you to help me shoot this video, right? So this producer then goes, or director goes to scout for places to shoot the video. There's two typical examples. This young entrepreneur releases the song, doesn't give credit to the producer. I mean, clearly there's a breach of intellectual property in that scene, right? Video director finds a beautiful house in Cantonments and speaks to I'm making this up, by the way.
Yeah.
Speaks to the...
You'd be amazed it happens. In fact, it's happened in my life as well.
Speaks to the gate man, the security man, and
who
says...
the boss is away,
the
come
boss
and
is
shoot.
away. Let me give you 100 CDs. And shoots. The song blows up. Right? Then, the young producer sits down, who gave him the beat, sits down and realizes, I'm not being paid for this.
I've been had.
Right? I've been had. Speaks to his sister. Sister says, I have a fantastic lawyer, Kwabna, who can take this matter on pro bono. Goes to the lawyer, setting it as a lawsuit for breach of intellectual property. The owner of the house comes back. His daughter is watching MTV, what's a local music channel?
Rock GH.
Rock GH, right? And sees, hold on, that's my house. I mean, the rest is, I think that we can follow
just see
through,
how
right?
this goes. So you have multiple lawsuits.
You have multiple lawsuits.
Musician is getting sued, director is getting sued.
Suddenly, your reputation is in tatters simply because you didn't do the right thing.
This is even before you've started.
Then whilst all of this is happening, let's make it even more interesting. As all of this is happening, he gets the biggest gig by Joy FM. You have an annual show, right?
Yeah, so maybe the old school's Union or
something, okay? Oh, no, that's not interesting. Let's change it. So he then decides that he wants to put on his own show, right? So he comes up with a venue, they put it together. They've never paid VAT or paid anything because there is some money that you have to pay as an entertainer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So GRA now are getting their act together, and then they turn up to collect money. There's a decision to be made. Does this gig go on? Did you get it?
Yeah.
Is it worth it?
Not at all. So the efficiency you talked about. So, I mean, I could see an injunction on the event.
Great.
And
You can see all the bloggers. I won't mention their name, but you can just imagine what's going to happen.
Some of them are my friends. I know how they will caption it.
Exactly.
You know? I mean, but so compliance really is like an insurance policy.
Central to the growth of a business.
Wow.
Simple.
We're going to take a break at this time, and when we come back, we'll be learning more about compliance from my guest today on The Big Conversation. Cynthia Kwaku is the founder and managing partner of CQ Legal and Consulting, and also founder of Africa One Media. Stay with us, we'll be back. Welcome back to Business Connect with me, Inshira Addo. My guest on The Big Conversation is Cynthia Kwaku, founder and managing partner of CQ Legal and Consulting and founder of Africa One Media. We're learning a lot about compliance. Clearly, it's something that is essential to business, efficiency, growth, and profitability. How important is compliance to an economy?
Very important. I mean, for so many dimensions, so important. I mean, the growth of the economy is very dependent on us as individuals. I think when we talk about economy, we seem to want to almost paint it as this very
abstract
thing that is there.
We
are part of it.
It's easier.
We are part of it. Okay. The success of your enterprises and your businesses have a positive effect on the economy. The ability for us to raise funding, to expand, growth, essentially has something to do with us as individuals. So individually complying helps us to benefit the economy and helps growth in the nation. And then also, I think, in terms of credibility. You know, people don't like to talk about it. I look at compliance because from a completely different angle when it comes to business growth, because I'm a banking and finance lawyer. I've had the privilege of working outside the country and sitting on panels that have had discussions about investing into various businesses, from infrastructure projects to manufacturing projects, and essentially boils down to compliance. Okay, so when people are making decisions whether to invest in a company or anything in an economy, they decide so many things. Is this a viable business? Is it feasible for me to put my money in this business? And a compliance culture comes into play. So we use an example of a manufacturing entity. Somebody wants to set up, we use your example of the water factory, for instance, and they've got on there two directors. One, it just happens to be a friend who they don't know. They put the person on the board. They just apply, ask for investors to come in. An investor will do his investigation, which as lawyers we call due diligence. And when they do their due diligence, every good company that does a due diligence, everything comes up. Whether you've paid your GRA taxes. In fact, in actual fact, there are certain projects that you can't even bid for if you don't have a tax clearance. So it suddenly gets to you doing all of that. You have to comply. So it's a central part of the economy. We all are players and contributors to it. You know, as you said, it's not an abstract thing.
Don't need to digress. This is a master class, but I want an opinion on something. Have we been shooting ourselves in the foot?
Many times.
How do we correct our course?
Change the mindset.
Okay, mindset.
That's the most difficult one to do.
Yeah, I'm trying. I'm figuring out. How do I even start?
That's just change the mindset.
How do I start? Say I have a business that's 3 years old, 2 weeks old, 5 weeks old, or 10 years. But I'm realizing, listening to you speak, that, okay, I need to get my act right. Where do I start?
You start by, I think if you've had a business for 3, 4 years, 10 years, you obviously know what you're supposed to do anyway. You're just pretending you don't. I think so. Most people would. If you don't, seek advice. Do some research yourself if you don't have the money to do it. Get the right people in. It may cost you, because if you've never registered for VAT and you're charging VAT, or you're supposed to register for VAT, and you do then immediately 3, 4 years when you haven't done all of that come up and say we want to register VAT, unfortunately the authorities will come to realize that you exist, but you must be prepared to pay for those lessons and move on.
No, yeah, otherwise
exactly.
You can't
exactly.
You can't charge VAT
you can't.
and not pay for it.
Exactly. So you would, unfortunately, there'll be some, you will sit down one day and, oh, did I even have to do it? Yes, it's the right thing. When I talk about mindset, I talk about, as Africa, we need to build legacy businesses.
There's something on one of the international channels where they call that the 100 Club.
Yes.
And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, okay, do we have a 50-year club in Ghana? Do we have a 100-year club in Ghana? And this is what you're speaking to. That, we...
And our mindset, I have 6 children.
You do?
I do.
Congratulations.
That's another conversation.
Okay.
But I do have 6 children. In fact, this morning, when I was coming to work, I was having a conversation with my son. And Africa One Media, he's a footballer, a young footballer. And when I initially set up Africa One Media, I had my brother and then somebody else act as directors and shareholders. And then this year I decided that I needed to make him a shareholder director. So I had a conversation with him and I said, because you're in sports, I clearly want him to invest in Africa One Media moving forward, but I also want to teach my children what is done. So every child of mine, every business I have, they know. They are part of the structure. Because I'm thinking legacy. I'm thinking of leaving something behind. I'm not thinking of a business dying when I die.
Yeah.
I'm not thinking that this law firm should die when I die. So in as much as my kids are not lawyers, those who work in here, they are the stakeholders. I'm going to make sure that I build a firm that will outlive me. If I'm not here, they should be able to carry it on, and it goes on. So changing the mindset is important. And I had a conversation with him today, and I said, you are now a director of Africa One Media. He said, like, oh, that's cool. I said, it's cool, but it comes with responsibility.
Yeah.
This is what, and we started having that conversation. So we have to change our mindset. The reason why the bigger economies are working because individual families are building wealth. When you talk about Disney, how long ago was Disney set up?
Didn't it just...
How many generations has it seen?
Oh, quite a number.
You think that if they weren't complying, they would have managed to get there?
Absolutely not.
So we need to start challenging ourselves to move away from the survival. There was some research done recently about Ghana and female entrepreneurs, for instance.
We're topping the charts on that.
We are topping the charts on that. But what about business failure?
We're quite competent there too.
We are.
If we could call failure competent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we do need to change our mindset that every idea that you have was planted for a reason. Being Christian, I never, let me say, I'll always attribute that to God. That if God gives me an idea, He's sown a seed.
Absolutely.
And we go to church and we pray and then we say, bless me, provide for me, and all of that. And He gives you an idea to package this particular beverage. What do you think it is?
That's your breakthrough.
And if it's your breakthrough, what do? You hold it well. Because if you did that business well,
then you get what you looked for.
It will become a source of wealth for you and generations to come. But if you treat it as, oh, it's just a way for me to just make a little bit of money on the side, and so I don't really care, it's not a structure, then it will be that. Then we go to church again and we pray again. We ask God to bless us. But He blesses us with ideas and visions on things to do. And so once He gives that to us, He also says what? Give to Caesar what's Caesar's and give to God what's God's. So what's compliance?
So your compliance is just basically taking care of business and doing it properly. Wow. So as we get ready to wrap this conversation up, and trust me, I could talk to you all day. I have like 1,000,001 questions. If I'm able to ensure that I'm compliant, but I do need to do business with other people. So
Yes.
we probably come together as a consortium or a third-party subcontracting situation. How do I ensure that I limit my exposure?
Contractually, you can.
Okay.
Contractually, you can. I mean, let's take a typical JV, right?
And that's a joint venture.
A joint venture. So you have a business idea, you feel that you need other partners to come in to form a consortium or a JV. You'd have a contractual JV going. And you can, when I say you can limit your exposure, it's by the obligations that are set out in the agreement will limit who does what, who does what. So long as you're doing your thing, if something happened, of course, it depends on the structure of the JV. Let me just qualify that. So if it's a JV that's contractual, that allows all of you to have separate obligations under it, then you may be protected. But there are different ways of making sure. And then due diligence. Due diligence. Okay. If you came to me and wanted to set up a business with me, no matter how smooth of a talker you are, I would do my due diligence on you. Okay, to make sure.
And it seems that, you know, you hear stories. In fact, it's something I've always said, that I'm struggling to find Ghanaian partnerships that have worked and crossed more than a generation. And I think it's also because in time past, I've been burnt before. We had a golden opportunity, some friends of mine, but somewhere down the line, I mean, we all said, oh yeah, this is, we're going to do this. So we go to the Registrar General, pick up forms, register the business, and we agree to who's going to get this and that. Somewhere down the line, we realized that although we had set up an entity, the expectations that we had of each other and the commitment levels that we expected were never communicated.
Because you didn't discuss it.
How do you avoid that? I mean,
you have the difficult discussions before you set up. We have we have something like that happening where a young entrepreneur came to me and said, I have this, I don't want to talk about, so I'm going to use different product. I have this fantastic product that I want to develop. 2 of my friends want to come in and do it. And I'm going to be the person managing the business on a day-to-day basis. It's taken me almost 5 weeks to finish off an MOU for him because I'm asking questions. I said, great, you're friends. You're all contributing equally to this venture. But have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Have you thought about that? How are you going to be paid? He said, we don't make it. I said, no, but it has to be in the MOU. Start off with that MOU first, see how it works for the next 6 months, and then register. Would you expect to be paid? He said, yes. And it's become an arduous process because I'm forcing them to think through the issue so that when we have a contract between them, everybody knows what the obligations are. That is the point at which you have the conversations about compliance. Right? And that is a point where you determine whether the people you want to go into business with are people you really want to go into business with. Because you may say, well, if we want to do this, we need to register with this, we need to go to the they say, oh, but we don't want to do it. Then you start to realize red flags, red flags, red flags. If this person is discouraging you from doing the right thing and you have a cultural and ethical standard, you immediately realize that this might not be the person, because this is the very person who's going to get you into trouble by not filing your taxes. And when it comes, so compliance is also almost like a test. This is when you start having the conversation. So we want to set this up. What do we need to do? How do we comply? And through the conversations, in most times, 90% of the time, you realize that you made a mistake and you move on without being burnt. But we don't like to have those conversations.
Because they're difficult. And we're very nice people.
We like to say we're nice people.
Yeah, well, until we're not.
Yeah.
As we wrap up, final question. AFCFTA is here. Ghanaian businesses would want to get their slice of this spending opportunity of what? 3 trillion. It's very difficult. See, I'm taking
Get your house in order.
Yeah.
That's the answer.
That's all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because as investors and multinationals come in to the playing field, the reason why you're getting a lot of multinationals strengthen their compliance structures and ask for more is they have to answer to a lot. So just to give you a little bit of a, so a pension fund sitting in the US has got lots of people's money, wants to invest in a project in Ghana. Who are they responsible to? The pensioners. And there are strict rules in their jurisdiction about how they do this. There are also strict rules about money laundering, strict rules about corruption. And any decision they take concerning the operations in Ghana, with you, the subcontractor, who or whoever else, has a ripple effect on them. Right? So they're getting their act together. We want to be part of, participate in all of this. We get our act together.
Well, it's very simple. And I'm very thankful.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
It's
been great. We could have gone on and on and on. Can they give us another hour or so?
No, we're going to do this.
We have to do it again. Part 1, part 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Go.
Exactly.
I like the drift.
Thank you.
But thank you very much. You've shared your experience, candid, case studies from your own personal experience, and I think I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And on behalf of the audience, I'd like to say a big thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm excited. I've taken this off my list. I've done Insurado.
Well, guess what? As John said in the Bible, I think it's somewhere in 1 John chapter 1, he talks about that which we have experienced is what we share with you. Well, I brought you a conversation with somebody who's not only learned from the book, but also learned the hard way. So if you heard all this, you have no excuse to fail. And later on in the show, we're bringing you the hustle as well as the digital business. Now, a lot of people create content. You go on YouTube, you watch all kinds of videos. People are getting paid good money for that. And our digital business today looks at the life of a digital content creator. And they'll share their own story with us, and hopefully you'll be inspired. And then imagine someone who goes from sculpting artwork and then decides that he's going to be a man who plays with fire. Pyrography. It's something I never knew existed until today. So enjoy the rest of the show, and we're taking a short break. When we come back, enjoy the hustle and also the digital business.